Time to go over the latest Nicolas Jaar album, Cenizas.
Tight.
That was terrible. That was a fucking awful joke. And I hate the fact that you roped me into being part of it.
Nicolas Jaar is a New York-based electronic composer and recording artist that fades between the realms of house, downtempo, IDM techno, ambient, and sometimes even plunderphonics. His most recent solo work besides this one, Sirens in 2016, was a huge skitty-scape that combined the realm of like almost like a city symphony with like ambient music, and I found to be a very interesting listen that was lacking at times and I think purpose, but I think truly had the idea of a soundscape down. After that, under the moniker of Against the Law of Logic, released 2012 to 2017, creating a weird mix of sampling and house music, combining into one of the most addictive and mind-controlling electronic albums in the last decade. It's completely consuming in everything you do. It completely gets you under its control. It's completely alluring and hypnotic, and it completely transcends a lot of genres by doing the best with a ton of simplicity. He followed that up with another Against All Logic album earlier this year, 2017 to 2019, which was... it had fundamentals, but it still wasn't sonically in the same place as the last one. It felt really weak in comparison. It wasn't a bad album by any means, but sonically what he was doing wasn't a step up or a progression into a new terrain, into something new. It just seemed kind of like a down step into a more empty terrain.
Yeah.
Now this new album, ranges in the realm of ambient, art pop, experimental music. It's interesting in how these realms kind of mix and how it projects the sense of isolation, because this album was written while Nicolas Jaar was kind of like isolating himself from the world, and he like stopped drinking and he separated himself off, and he tried to find a way to like balance himself off from negativity, but like he wanted to project himself through music, and in the end, like the darkness, even though he tried to like separate himself from a bunch of negative aspects of his life, like the darkness still found a way to creep in through the music, which I thought was like a really interesting concept. That at a time where everyone's isolated by force, Nicolas Jaar was ahead of the curve, and he's producing a project that's about isolation, or sonically in the same realm as isolation. And it fits a time period that's very strange.
Do you
coincidental?
This like makes me wonder, do you think the artists who like recently did things like, I'm going to separate myself out to make my art, I'm going to do it by force, do you think they're kicking themselves because now they're forced to do it anyways by like everyone? Do you think they're upset? It's like, God damn it, I should have just waited a little bit. Now I'm doing it twice.
But then they weren't special.
I guess.
The reason they said they did it is because they wanted to be cool and just watch Netflix and then maybe play on the drum machine or paint something. I don't know.
Yeah. That's all I make art.
This album's 13 songs, 53 minutes, and it's honestly, after an album I was disappointed in, Nicolas Jaar kind of redeems himself and going into a new terrain, kind of forwardly compiling almost like a self-reflection of himself in music, which I found was really interesting. Even though he like the whole entire purpose was that he was trying to communicate through music, in the end he just kind of communicated how this lingering sense of negativity, which I thought was interesting. Yeah,
this album is, if there's definitely one thing you can say about this album, is it creates a mood, and that mood is very moody.
Like the opening to this Vanish is this metallic and glowing synth piece that transcends into these beautiful vocals that feel like they're falling in this eternal void. They're saying, say you're coming back, like this hopeful optimism for something. Menysid is like this choir humming into oblivion as it comes into frame, along with other atmospheric noises that sound like footsteps but turn out to be like drums, and this creates like a weird soundscape loop that has like like this loop has like a physical location, which I found was strange. Like what I thought was like distant footsteps that went with like the voices is now just like actual drums that were just like reverbed. I just found it to be like a weird sense of like shift of location of a pattern. Cenizas, which means ashes in Spanish, is like an emotional otherworld realm with this lovely Spanish vocals talking about, in the ashes we will form, knowing nothing now is better. There's no space for anything, but we are together without news of another world. This like sense of optimism. How can you live without a hope in life, or like an expected outcome, and then going to but why doesn't common sense respond? I can no longer use its language. The sense of being unable to communicate with the sense people around you is insanely cramped and isolating. I love the end with the drum coming into frame with these additional vocals, like balancing out the palette at the end of the track into a final location after transferring around a little bit. I thought was really unique. Agosto has this harsh horn that welcomes you into a brassy, surrealist dream. Like a lot of this album feels very dreamlike in a sense, as like you're transferring in a bunch of different locations, almost like you're disassociating with yourself, which I thought was very interesting, that this album almost gives you like an out-of-body experience. Like you've been in isolation for too long, and now you're having cabin fever, to the sense where you don't know yourself anymore. You don't know what your reality is.
Yeah. There's a lot of dreamlike elements in there. Can't remember which track, but there was like one that had like almost like a little bit of like a jazz like influence that just really reminded me of the way like David Lynch and artists like that could merge like jazz with other things to create these really dreamlike atmospheres.
Yeah, Sunder has this rapid distortion that transfers into vocals looping into a playful synth patch. He's talking about, now I can see right behind my eyes. Just this idea is that you know everything in your life, like you could see everything, like you've almost reached the promised land in a sense, that like you've gone so beyond the bottom of the barrel that you're delusional. That I just found to be like almost like a weird surrealist moment, another weird surrealist moment in lyricism, that it's just like none of these components really add up, and it just equates to like this downtrodden falling off the deep end. Hello Chain has this choir stacked with strange pitch vox samples over the top to make this swirly harmony of sanity. Garden has this thick, rich grand piano that is put into a perfect place, and it weirdly begins cutting forward or behind on top of itself. Like it's just like it glitches out a little bit, not glitches, but more like skips forward, skips back a bit at the end of the track, and I found it just be a really strange moment that happens at the end. Xerox has a sharp and ear-piercing meditation like quality to it. The harmonizing vocals, the distorted and warping noises that rattle your brain are just insane. Like everything just kind of meshes in and out of frame, like you're slowly losing exposure on your camera, and now everything's just kind of blending together, or slowly losing focus on your camera, and now everything's just kind of turning into a mesh. There's no definite shapes anymore. And then finally, Faith Made of Silk is the surprising normal pop moment at the end of this surreal journey. There's the warm vocals of Nicolas with light percussion and dreamy and comforting synths with a huge rapid fire breakdown at the end. Reminds me a lot of Julian Casablancas, talking about you have nowhere to go, look around, not ahead. A peak is just the way towards a descent. The forces on the hill manifested by what you perceive as wind, look around, not ahead. This idea of not getting your expectations up high because you know they're going to fail you, and kind of the trouble that has. Yeah. The problematic statement that is kind of the downer and the true heartbreaker to the end of this very isolated and captive album.
Yeah, this album is kind of a great piece of just really not necessarily bleak, but just lonely and somber atmosphere. Like the joke I made, like it creates a mood, and that mood is moody. Like it was a joke, but like it's also very true. Like the mood on here is one that is very somber and isolating and just kind of very filled with sorrow. a lot of the times, but it builds that element and that emotion so masterfully that it's never really overwhelming. It's just, it really captures just the isolation elements of all of those feelings and just the way that they just kind of sit and linger with you.
I don't have anything else to say. Keeping in mind those scores, if you're telling me this right now, I think this is an 8+. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is an 8.
Yeah, I just think sonically it is captive and controlled. It is at times very unhinged in the sense of almost like losing reality, escaping from almost yourself, like losing contact with yourself at times, just disassociating. I just find it very surprising mix of ambient and art pop.